Hey everybody, this is Rebecca Mills Anderson. I realize I don't have on my headphones, so let me get that so that you guys can hear me just a little bit better. That should be improved for everybody. Just as a reminder, again, my name is Rebecca Mills Anderson. I'm here for my second talk on the Autoimmune Mastermind. I'm a certified health coach and specialist in autoimmune and neurological disorders. I'm the owner and CEO of MyCrazyJourney.com. And I also work with Integrative Health Center of Alabama, where I work under a certified functional medicine doctor to help my patients in a fully holistic manner. I help them take their bodies back from chronic conditions. You can follow me on Facebook on My Crazy Journey's page, and also on Instagram as Rebecca at My Crazy Journey, and on Twitter as MCrazyJourney. I joke about it, calling My Crazy Journey. So just be silly. Hi, Kristen. I see that you're there. I see one other person is there, but it doesn't tell me who. But so whoever you are, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm going to kind of slow down the beginning so that we can get people to join us after a few minutes. First, does anyone have any questions lingering from the last talk? If anybody does, feel free to go ahead and do them now. And if not, then we will pretty much just jump through. First, I want to do a medical disclaimer. I am not a doctor. I am a health coach. My scope of practice is mainly food and lifestyle. And what's more than that is I am not your doctor. So I don't know your medical history. Every single case is very, very different. And there is, especially if you're not my patient, then I cannot help with individual things. I can help you with general things, but not individual things. So just know that right off the top of the head, that if it's specific to you, then it's just not able for me to answer ethically. So last time we talked about CIRS, and we talked a little bit about, hi, Allie, how are you? I see there's another person too. Again, it doesn't tell me who they are. Go ahead and type in the box and let me know you're here. That way I can say hello to you individually. It'll let me feel a little bit more personable, so I can call you by name or respond to you by name. That'd be great. So last time we talked about CIRS, we talked about what it is. We talked about diagnoses, controversy. Hi, Jamie. So glad you're here. Hi, Ariel. Thank you for joining us. We also talked last time about what you can do now to start making progress. So hi, Kirsten. I'm glad you're here. I want to also tell, if you haven't seen the first one, it's very important to see the first one. There's a lot of misdiagnoses that are actually CIRS, and there's a lot of CIRS is also a cause to a lot of diseases. Hi, Alicia. How are you? It's also a cause to a lot of autoimmune and neurological illnesses, specifically autoimmune, neurological, MS, POTS, mast cell activation disorder. Hi, Rachel, how are you? Be sure to catch the first one. It'll explain a lot, so it'll answer a lot of questions that you may have this time, especially when it comes to what to do in the meantime between now and the end game. So when someone does or doesn't, or suspects or does not, there's a huge process between the point where they either get diagnosed or suspect and the time where they can address their physical environment. So all of that I talked about in my first talk. So there's a lot you can do, a lot that power that you can take without addressing your physical environment. But the end game is to address the physical environment and get the toxins out. I'll explain what that means in just a moment. So I'll be talking today about what to do next, what to do when your gene test comes back positive or negative, how to track your progress, how to test your environment, how to improve your physical environment when you're not ready to remediate or move. I'm sorry. Yeah, that's right. So then this next section is actually for, hi, Elena. Hi, Alexandria. Thank you for joining us. It's really for people who've already gotten every step in place that I talked about in my first talk. They've gotten all the food in place, they've gotten all the lifestyle in place, they've reduced their toxins, they've gently started opening up their detox pathways, they're getting fresh air all the time, they're exercising, they've got great sleep hygiene, they've decluttered their home, they've reduced EMFs, and all the other things that I talked about in that first talk. So when you're ready, go ahead and catch up later on that one so that you know where you can start now. So I'll be referencing that in this talk about things to do in the meantime. So I refer to this group of actions as step 2 actions. These actions are intermediate actions specifically to address water damaged buildings. They're also called WDBs. They might be refilled. People who have CIRS might also be called having building syndrome, or SBS. So this might be called a sick building. There's all sorts of other different names for this, but I'm going to use the Schumaker terminology, which is, thank you for all the likes, the water damage building, or WDBs. WDBs comprise 80% of CIRS cases. So 80% are reacting to mold and mycotoxins that come from these water damaged buildings. For that reason, I'm going to speak a lot about that. So a lot of this remediation and moving will have to do with that. Of course, if you are reacting only to chemical sensitivities or biotoxins from, like, say, Lyme disease or something like that, then those will be less on your physical environment and more on the toxins of what their root cause is. But because 80% are dealing with this, this is where I'm going to focus today. Water damage simply means that it has some type of water intrusion. Excuse me for reading over here. This is a lot, very complex topic. So in order to keep it organized and to be useful to you, I've made an outline for myself. So water damage just means that it's had some type of water intrusion, such as a water damaged wall, a carpet, a floor. This could be a leaky faucet. It could be my laundry machine exploded. It could be my bathtub overflowed. It could be I dropped water somewhere. So that's something definitely went spill-proof containers. So it could be any of that. One busted water pipe, water-soaked wall, or flood qualifies the structure as being water damage. It's estimated that 50% of our infrastructures count as water damaged building. However, if you have ever tried to find a house that has zero water damage, you may question those statistics. I myself have been searching for clean housing, and there are some people who have never been able to find it just within their parameters or what have you. So it's something that, you know, it's definitely not easy to find. So to find one that has never had a water leak of any kind, and to question of whether or not it's been addressed correctly, is a big question. It takes a lot of action. So first thing you want is the results of your HLA test. I mentioned this in the first talk, and for those who are just tuning in, an HLA test is a specific type of gene test done by a specific lab. This is then converted into to see if you have a combination of genes. There could be multiple combination of genes. That means that you are susceptible. One combination is for mold, one combination is for multiple chemical sensitivities, one combination is for both. Another combination includes sensitivity to Lyme toxins, or susceptibility to chronic fatigue syndrome, or needs to avoid Gardasil is specifically called out, or it could be all of the above, of which they call the dreaded one. I go more into that in the first one. So this HLA test is very important when addressing your environment. So that test then needs to be put through a converter or converted into useful information to tell you which gene combination you have. This will tell you whether or not you are sensitive to mold and biotoxins, chemicals, or both, or all of the above, or that I mentioned just a few minutes ago. Once you get this, then you can verify that mold is an issue for you. Now I want to kind of take a moment to kind of talk about that. So 98% of CIRS cases come back positive on this HLA test. However, that means that 2% of people who are not having one of these genes combination can still get sick from these environments. So that kind of comes a problem. So while 98% is pretty good odds, it's not good odds if you're one of the 2%. I have seen people who we have no reason to believe that they have this gene combination and they still get sick. However, these people generally get better as soon as they're out of the environment. So they recover quickly. They don't need the medication. Their body isn't storing the toxins. It's just being overburdened by the toxins. So that is something to consider, especially if you tend to be one of the few percent. Every time anyone says, I always say that because every time anyone says, oh, there's a 1% chance, I usually fall in that category. Luckily this time I did not. So while MTHFR is a part of CIRS, it is not all of it. So you'll need the HLA test. And another one, the MTHFR would also be useful because it'll let you know if there's any other things that are not showing up in the HLA test. So if you have that, that's great. If not, just assume that you have MTHFR. It really is very, very common in these. I'd say 99% of these cases have MTHFR. So there's some common mistakes people make in this next step to test their environment. They test it in an incorrect manner, and they do their lab test incorrectly. So I want to address something that I said about testing in my first talk. I mentioned that I don't do all the testing in my office right off the bat to start addressing my patients' issues. But I want to be clear that that does not negate the benefits of thorough testing. However, timing, budget, and purpose play a role in testing what and when and how many of those tests. All of you heard that I don't need 10 different tests to tell us what we already know, that you're inflamed. So I don't need 10 different tests to tell me 10 different ways that you're inflamed to start making a difference in your life. However, eventually some of them serve a purpose. I also mentioned controversy over testing and diagnosis, albeit I did not cover all the controversies. But I do not want to mislead any of you to think that testing is unnecessary. I use some of this further testing at specific times to get a baseline to measure the effectiveness of some treatments or to guide specific treatments. I'm using them in a very specific ways that may not be needed for an individual who is not ready for those treatments. So we'll talk about some of those at the end of the talk. So I also want to address medication. There's pharmaceutical and non-pharmaceutical medication available. However, the Schumaker Protocol begins at the time that you are no longer being exposed. I want you to let that kind of settle in. So a lot of people will recommend going to a Schumaker certified protocol, and they definitely can play a wonderful role in your healing in addition to a health coach, in addition to functional medicine. However, their very first step outside of testing is to fix your environment. There is a big portion, hey Kaylee, thank you for joining. There's a big portion and months and even years sometimes between the time you're diagnosed and the time that you can fix your environment. So that leaves a lot of time where if you're not working with someone like me, someone who's experienced with it and who knows how all the ins and outs, that can where you don't feel empowered. So working with someone in the meantime is very empowering and will help you to help make a lot of progress. I talked about you can make 75 to 95% progress with food and lifestyle alone, of course, according to the individual and how much they're willing to do to get there. But the end game is addressing your environment. So some believe that this is also that when you are no longer being exposed, such as, and I refer to this as like having a perfect environment. Now, there's no perfect environment, so I use that term used loosely. But many believe that when you reach this perfect environment, you can start being treated by the Schumaker Protocol, and that it is this time when medication, pharmaceutical or otherwise, also begins. In my first talk, I covered what to do in the meantime. But not being exposed is the hardest part. So my work focuses on helping those who are still being exposed. Remediation, moving, prepping for either one of those, and all the things involved are either in either situation are a big decision. They are costly and they can also be scary for many, especially if you are chronically ill. Some cannot do this either for financial reasons because they mentally and emotionally can't handle the stress yet, or whatever reasons, or because of their living situation or other people or other situations that complicates matters. So if this is you, please see my first talk from January 22nd. If you have already done the steps from January 22nd overview, then these next steps are to get unexposed. So at the time you become unexposed to toxins, you still have choices about how to proceed. My goal is to make you feel as good as you can, no matter where you are in that journey. And that first step is that HLA test. So once you get this HLA test, you will know whether a water damaged building is a risk for you. As I said, 98% of the cases will make them susceptible to water damaged buildings. So if you're positive for one of the gene combinations, you will want to test your environment using what's called an ERMI or HERTSMI test. It is best to get both. You can go to mycometrics.com. They are a laboratory in Jersey. So an air test is not what you want. Calling a mold guy is not sufficient in testing or treating your environment. There is much more to it, and you should not try to navigate this process without some form of leadership. You want to get an ERMI test, and it will need to be interpreted into what we call a HERTSMI scoring system. Depending on your C4A lab test, and that's very different from a C4 or a C3A, and it can only be done by certain labs, and your MSH also done by specific labs. Those two lab tests, again, it's called a C4A. I'm going to type that into my chat box, C4A and MSH. Again, those are from specific labs, so you need someone to direct you. I don't know them right off the top of the hand because there's a whole chart about how to test them, and I won't go there. This will tell us what your requirements are. Thank you, Allie, for posting micrometrics.com. They're fabulous. This will tell you the requirements for your physical environment. So there's one combination where you need the score to be below a 1 of the Hertzmeet, and there's one combination that you need that you can do a 2. Some people do well in like a 3 or a 4, but of course the ideal is a 1 or 2, and it's a general guideline. So the environment in question, it may be your home, it may be your work, or it may be simply cross-contamination from other environments you've visited or environments that you lived or worked in the past stored in your body, and those toxins are in it still. For those who didn't see the first talk, the gene disables your body, the gene combination disables your body from neutralizing and get rid of these toxins. So they store forever, wreaking havoc and inflammation in your body, et cetera, et cetera. So these mycotoxins come back to your home from other environments. They infect your bed, your couch, your carpet, your clothes, your toys, your hair dryers, etc. So just once you move is not simply all of it. So Micrometrics, I'm going to go back there for a second. It's a lab in Jersey that will mail you a Swiffer type sample collection cloth. An air test is not going to work. An air test, these mycotoxins are heavy. They are not found in air samples, so that's a great way to miss it. Having someone cut up on your wall and look inside of it also will miss this. These are molds that hide in the tops of walls, in the corners. They are molds that you can't see, and they will not be found by traditional means. So having a normal way of doing that is different. They're found in the dust of your house, and they also absorb in your porous household items, such as the ones I mentioned before, including mattresses, couches, books, artwork, and even in vents and things like that. They're in our HVAC system, our air ducts, and more. So in order to get a quality sample, you'll need to let your house get dirty. Now, some of us, this drives us absolutely bananas, and other of us, we're like, woohoo, we don't have to clean for a little while, and we have a good excuse. So the recommended is to let the dust settle for 2 to 3 weeks and take samples from all over the house. So I suggest testing multiple rooms, such as like where you spend the most of your day, like maybe it's near your couch, maybe it's a home office, and also by your bedroom, absolutely. If you have a meditation or yoga room, test that area. I would test bathrooms because they are very highly subject to moisture and mold. So test as many rooms as you possibly can. So after letting the dust settle for 2 to 3 weeks, this will gather enough mold DNA to be able to get an accurate measurement. If for some reason your gene test says that you are not mold sensitive, you may skip this step and focus on reducing chemicals. But most of you, that will not happen. Some of those, such as that usually is like healthy husbands, that usually don't have one of these genes combinations. However, they can still have mild reactions such as fatigue, depression, inflammation. It can trigger autoimmune disease, things like that. So if somebody starts to have changes in behavior or energy or just general function of their body, it may be something that you want to catch early. So that's able to be done. You will want to test your environment and then get those 2 lab tests that I mentioned. So again, those tests, the C4A and the MSH, they're inflammatory markers. They tell us specific things about hormone levels and stuff like that that are affected by this. These tests must be done from specific labs, or they will give you false negatives or incorrect readings if done from any other labs due to the incorrect processing of the labs. The specific labs are for because they process it in a certain way. So we've had a lot of people go to labs that did it right, and then they changed it, and they've been able to see right there that they're not doing it right. So communities are able to communicate this information together. So once you get the results from your labs and your ERMI test, you have a couple choices on how to proceed. The ideal is then to remediate or move to a clean or perfect environment. Again, this is a process that a mold guy cannot do with you with the information he is educated on. We need the information he is educated on, but he needs some extra information to be successful. You will need several checklists from your provider to do this without wasting time and money. So I'm going to repeat that. Do not do this on your own, and do not let some guy come in without the proper checklist. One thing you don't want to do is have him just come in and spray the mold. That is not going to happen. You have to remove the entire water damaged area. So you also need to know how good you need it to be from those former tests. So I just want to reiterate that and make sure that I'm very, very clear on that. So don't let someone come in and tell you that they can spray the mold away or that there is no mold because they can't see it. This is not an accurate way of testing the building, as I mentioned before, and spraying is not a good way to treat a building or a part of the house. So to kind of put it in the most oversimplified terms, you want thermographic screening to see where the water source is, the moisture source is. Then you want to remove the entire water damaged area. And then there will be another process to make the environment clean from cross-contamination. So that's a very simple overview of that. Third, you need to understand that it is not the mold that is making you sick. It is the toxins released from these molds. So dead toxins, when you kill them, they release molds. And so killing them can actually make things worse. You will most likely need, and I'm going to say this slowly because this is really hard for people to hear. Most likely, you will need to leave the environment before addressing the problem. This is one of the challenges because while they're remediating, they will be stirring up a whole bunch of mycotoxins, releasing those mycotoxins into the air, and this could cause things to get worse. So this is one of the most difficult and challenges. This is a great time to go on vacation. It's a great time to go over an extended camping trip, go stay with family. Some people choose to Airbnb. They choose, I know one lady who put a tent in her backyard and only came in for running water. And that's what she had to do during this phase of her remediation. So most likely you will need to leave the environment before addressing the problems. There will be exceptions or ways around this, but each case is different. So yeah. There are some sources that do not mention leaving the environment, but I think it depends on the case, the house, and the extent of the damage and how you can protect yourself from the influx of mycotoxins upon remediation. There are different ways to remediate. Some people say to do it level by level. Some people have a room by room process where they seal off rooms. There are ways to prevent that influx and go into the rest of the house, but that is a longer conversation on how to break down that area and prevent the rest of the house from being cross-contaminated. As you go from one room to the other, you need to protect the ones that are already remediated from being cross-contaminated, the one that is being remediated from cross-contaminated everywhere else and making you sick, and then the places that have not been remediated need to be protected from being even worse. So there's a lot to consider there. So that's an entire process in itself. So there are some, as I mentioned, there's some sources that don't mention leaving it, but I really think it depends on how much process you protect yourself. So killing the mold, as I mentioned before, will release the toxins in greater amount than before treating it. This means that you will get worse. So definitely don't go into your basement and kill all the mold to trying to keep it at bay. If you decide to do that, please talk about that with your healthcare provider so that you can make sure that you're protecting yourself. Ozones are another danger zone. While they can kill mold, they can ruin household environments. They can make you very sick, specifically if you have lung things, it's not to be breathed. There's a whole process with that I could do a talk just on that. So please make sure you do your research or ask your healthcare provider to guide you on whether or not ozone is right for you and your environment. So to overview what I've covered so far, you will test the home, then you will remove yourself from the environment. Then you will address the source of the mold or water damage while you are not in the environment. Once the sources are removed, then you still do not move back in the house right away. So Kaylee mentions that she went through all of this and it was the hardest thing to deal with. She had to leave her house and everything in it. How I would do it all over again, I feel so much better now, she mentions. So thank you, Kaylee, so much for doing that. Air oasis, it depends on the ozone factor. There are a lot of downsides to ozone, so if it has the ozone, I know that Schumaker recommends an air oasis, but that is one of those things that he also says may have to be replaced or discarded when you go into the new environment. And there are some definite dangers to any kind of ozone. It is not to be breathed, especially if you are having any shortness of breath, asthma, or any kind of deterioration or connective tissue disorder or anything like that. I would highly recommend caution before using those, and I am not recommending for anyone without talking to their healthcare provider and fully exploring the pros and cons for their individual situation. But Kaylee, thank you so much for saying that. As Kaylee mentioned, this is hard, but she feels so much better now. And like me, who is 95% of the way there, and it's just that last little bit that fixing my environment will do, I look forward to going through this. I'm buying a new house. I'm going to have it tested before I move in. I'm going to reduce the VOCs when I get there. I'm going to maintain it so there's never any more mold, all that kind of stuff. So then at that point, I can get the 5%. I can get off the long-term adrenal meds. So what it looks like if you don't address the physical environment is that you are on adrenal support for the rest of your life. You are constantly having to detoxify multiple times a week just to keep your body going. You have to keep adding layers of antioxidants, which is all completely doable. And it's totally worth it for all that effort. I've been doing that for 3 years myself. However, my goal is to one day not need 2 pills of supplements or 2 trays of supplements every day. So to reduce that, I'm going to fix my environment. So that's a little bit. Allie asked, what if the C4A is low? I had C4, came back very low, and I've heard this is more typical of lupus. So yes, this can be useful. First of all, I always question whether or not the lab processed it the same way that Schumaker recommends, but it also needs to be compared to the MSH, and those comparisons, what the real value that I see in those 2 tests is telling us what we need the environmental toxin load to be. So that goes a little bit more in that. I don't have that memorized. I have a chart that I use, so I apologize. I can't really speak to that right now. Also, without knowing your MSH, I can't put the full picture together. Ariel mentions she was in treatment in Mexico when she realized she had mold illness and home was full of black mold growth in her furnace room. It definitely is hard, but I'm doing so much better now that we got rid of pretty much everything and got into a clean home. So she improved already. I improve literally if I go away for a weekend. I have sinus infections that clear up like that. But I still have long-term toxins to address also, so that's something to consider. Would she be even better if she addressed them? Absolutely. So we'll talk about how to address them a little bit at the end after you get into a clean environment. Okay, so just to overview, retest the home, remove yourself from the environment, address the source of the mold. Once that is, you still don't move it right back in away. There's still more work to do. So once the mold source is gone, you will have to clean the house of all contamination. This is not as simple as hiring a cleaning crew. This it means removing all of your possessions and either disposing of them. Now I want to speak to this real quick because it's really hard to hear. All of your possessions will need to be removed. You will either dispose of them, clean them, or third option is otherwise. There is another solution if you're not ready to dispose of something and you can't clean it before moving back into the home. So I'm going to break this down into, first I'm going to explain what that means. So some things that are porous and that cannot be cleaned. For example, clothing can be cleaned, bedding can be cleaned, sheets and towels, they can be cleaned, area rugs could be cleaned, sofas, mattresses, and pillows may not be able to be completed. Depends on really on whether or not you like to wash your pillows. Those things cannot be. Books, some toys, and photographs and artwork cannot be cleaned. So what I recommend doing, if you, for example, I have some books that my grandmother gave me, and they are antique leather-bound editions of these wonderful literature things and heirlooms for my family. So what I do instead is to put them in an airtight container. I can visit them anytime I want. I can go read them out in the yard, but I will not let them contaminate my house. And that way I don't have to get rid of them. For family photographs, or any artwork that can be laminated, that is an option. This not only air seals any mycotoxins in the porous thing, but it also allows them to be cleaned or wiped down. So definitely don't have to get rid of everything. There's always solutions. If you're not ready to dispose of something that cannot be cleaned, just store it. Just vacuum seal it until you're ready, or if and when you may never be ready, and that's okay. It's vacuum sealed, you're safe. So I wanted to make sure that I covered that because that could be kind of a panic attack for people. So, so I don't have time to go into how to find a clean home if you choose to move rather than remediate. There's checklists for house shopping as well as checklists for moving to ensure you do not contaminate your new home with the mycotoxins from your old home. There's also guides to maintaining the new home to ensure it does not become contaminated, or how to address water damage if one of your pipes leak, and how to do it properly so that you don't have a water damaged home after that happens. Each one of these could be a talk in itself, and each one is a bit of a story. So I am going to go into the next part, and this applies to those who have just remediated or those who are getting ready to move, and also to those who are not ready to do either, but are ready to further improve their environment for an eventual move down the road. So like right now I'm in that middle zone. I'll be moving in the next 6 months. This is a perfect example. If you know you want to move, like say in a year, go ahead and start working on this process now, what you can, and don't do what you can't. So if you're remediating, this will happen right after your gene test, the food and lifestyle changes, the beginner steps to improving the environment. So again, if you haven't gotten an overview of those food and lifestyle changes or the beginner steps to improving your environment, please see my first talk on CIRS from January 22nd. So for those who do remediate, this step will be done after you remediate, but before you move back in, if you moved out during the remediation to protect yourself. This will also be done for those who move when they've gathered all their stuff and it's out of the other house, but it's not in the other house. So usually they might store it, don't store it in the garage, it'll contaminate the house, but maybe get one of those portable on-site storage units that we have. And then that way you can take it in at your own pace if you're not willing to do that all in one day, which I wouldn't blame you if you weren't. So, okay, so if you're not ready to remediate or move, then after your gene test, food and lifestyle changes, you'll want to still further address that lifestyle. So cleanable things, you want to separate everything into cleanable, non-cleanable, and storable items. So that's kind of what I mentioned before. So the first thing to give you an example, I'm going to answer a question real quick. Black markings around the ground of a bathtub or shower stall could be mold. Yes, they could. So back to the cleanable, non-cleanable. So cleanable, what I'm doing, for example, I'm going to move in the summer and I have all my winter stuff that I'm going to start cleaning. It's probably around March or April. So my bedding, I'm going to immediately vacuum seal that so that it doesn't get cross-contaminated by my first environment. Anything that I can't clean right away will be put in an airtight container and will be cleaned before it goes into my house. My couch and my mattress will not be going with me. So I'll either have to buy a new one or live without one until that is able to be happen. So I'm making preparations for that now. So if you're moving or remediating, these are the decisions that you kind of need to make and go through before you move. If you're in that in-between stage where you're not really doing that, it's a good time to start further decluttering. Go ahead and get rid of things that you are willing to. For example, it took me a few months to get ready to get rid of my artwork. I was an artist, I had all these wonderful paintings, but when I was ready, I did it. And now I don't have to worry about those later. My couch I'm going to use until I move. So all these different decisions are, of course, going to be to the individual, but it's just something to know to go ahead and start that process of thinking about what can I pack, what can I vacuum seal, what can I get rid of, and what do I want to keep until my environment is perfect. And how's that going to look? So go ahead and start wrapping your head around it right now. Toys are a really hard one, especially if there's a young one in there. So start thinking about that process of toys and books for your little ones, if that's an issue, or if it's an issue for you, because it is for me. Cleanable things refers to all things that can be cleaned. While a couch and all that cannot be, things that can be is, for example, hardwood tables that are painted. My kitchen appliances, they can all be cleaned, provided except for my sieve and my colander and things that have like a net or anything like that. So just right now, take inventory and separate those things that you will stay with you when you have a clean environment and those that will not. Once you identify all things that can be cleaned, you will throw away or box up whatever you can. You will not replace any of these before you move into a perfect environment. The more that you throw away and get rid of or box up with airtight boxes, the cleaner your environment can become right now. So it says, what about clothes that need to be dry cleaned only? Well, let's see, you can dry clean at home with things like dry out. The other option is to have them dry cleaned, but make sure that you're not having them dry cleaned in a water damaged building. Once they are dry cleaned in a non-water damaged building, you will want to immediately vacuum seal them or store them up, or just clean them regularly while you're in that imperfect environment. Once you are in the perfect environment, you want to make sure that your clothes do not get cross-contaminated. One of the steps that we decided, because some people do seriously, people get very, very strict on this, and I'm not recommending doing this exactly unless you're ready for it, is I have some people who have decontamination chambers with airlocks in their garage, and they take off their dirty clothes and then they have new clothes in there and then they go into their house. Now, I'm not recommending that anyone start there because I think that's a very advanced option. If somebody's ready to do that, great. But if they're not, where me and my husband decided was that we would have an entrance right by our washing machine. And when we came in from work, if our work area turns out to be water damaged, we will immediately put our clothes in the washing machine before we go into the rest of the house. And that way we will prevent cross-contamination in addition to cleaning thoroughly every week. So that's a way to cut down on the cross-contamination. Do I recommend using any air filters at all while living in the water damaged building? Yes. There is, like, for example, I know he mentions the Honeywell being the most affordable one. Don't spend money on anything that may have to be replaced. For example, if you want to spend $150 and it can be cleanable, or you want to spend, I don't know, thousands of dollars and it be cleanable, or you're leaving them there. For example, there's HEPA filters you can put into your entire HVAC system, but you would leave that in the house. There is HEPA filters that can be cleaned. I can just replace the filter and then I can take them into my new environment. There's also filters that are not able to be cleaned. So definitely I wouldn't spend a lot of money. I would spend some money if that's an option to you to buy an inexpensive one. I know, like I mentioned, he mentioned Honeywell air purifiers were very inexpensive. That would be a great way to make a dent in your current environment to make it just a little bit more bearable. Brittany says, this all makes so much sense. My mysterious health illnesses and chronic fatigue started when I moved to the East Coast, and that apartment black mold started to grow. Unfortunately, I think my belongings are contaminated and have followed me to the last places I have lived and to the West. You know, I can totally relate to that. My first chronic fatigue was in 2003, and I was living in a basement apartment in Norway surrounded by snow. I had some issues in junior high and high school in a house that, I mean, come on, it was old. It was probably water damaged. My next diagnosis was I know I had water damage in multiple places in that home, and in my current one also. So we continued. It's a lot, but it is able to find clean housing and take your body back. So I want to make sure you know that. Okay. Why all of a sudden people get sick from mold? Is there possible issues with their detoxification pathways? That is pretty much the definition of mold biotoxin illness. It often comes with MTHFR, and to kind of quote Amy Myers, who deals with autoimmune diseases, she mentions that in her entire career, she's met one of her patients who did not have an MTHFR. So we're talking about 99.9% have MTHFR, but the gene combination itself means that we cannot detox these toxins. So they store up and then they store in our fat. So that should definitely, if you're wondering about that, that is definitely a thing. So the more that you throw away and get rid of or box with an airtight boxes, the cleaner your current imperfect environment can be. And that is going to help you in the meantime. So once you have thrown away or boxed up these uncleanables, it is necessary to clean the house thoroughly and regularly. I recommend at least once a week. The entire house will need to be cleaned with non-toxic, preferably anti-mycotoxin cleaners. You can buy non-toxic cleaners and simply add essential oils to them if they are tolerated by you. According to PubMed, these include lemongrass, cinnamon, sage, and thyme essential oils for anti-mycotoxins. These are different than anti-fungal ones. So yeah, so I agree. Ali says, I've never met anyone with autoimmune disease who does not have MTHFR. It's almost not even worth testing for. I agree with her. And because of the statistics, I don't waste money on it. I think that money is better used to go get an HLA test at this point. And we don't bother it because it just adds to your bill. So is there any good resource for helping someone determine if they're in a water damaged building? Yes, but I want to come back to that. So I'm going to pin that comment. So I want to come back to that at the end because that is a longer answer. So I want to make sure I get through some of the things. Okay, so the other thing you're going to do to address the environment while you've decluttered extra and you've cleaned it thoroughly is you want to diffuse antifungal and or anti-mycotoxin essential oils. Now be careful with their with those essential oils. A lot of them add humidity to the house, and so you don't want to add humidity. You want to be careful and keep monitoring that. So you can get a dehumidifier, but again, that's one thing that may have to be removed, left behind when you move. So that's a personal call on whether or not you want to address that or not, or whether or not you want to spend that money with the risk of not being able to take that with you. So just think about that very quickly, but also adding the humidity through things like an essential oil diffuser, you know, that's a personal call. So that's a very individual situation. You'll also want to remove any sources of water damaged furniture or belongings, such as a piece of furniture, a rug. Do not replace flooring or walls unless you have moved or remediated. Carpeting is not recommended in a new home. Just FYI, it is a cesspool of germs. So I want to talk about water damaged furniture. So I bought a mantle, and I'm kicking myself. I'm about to show how it was a really stupid decision I made. I bought a mantle because I wanted a fireplace mantle. I wanted to do one of those things from Pinterest, and I bought an old mantle and I redid it, and I put a mirror behind it and had my stockings hung from it. It was really cute. It was water damaged, and at one point it was actually in my bedroom, and I kept wondering why I was sick. And then finally I realized that I had a water damaged piece of furniture sitting right where I'm sleeping, or before that it was right where I watch TV. So look for any kind of furniture that may have gotten water damage and definitely get rid of that. Allie mentions that house dust containing things like VOC, lead paint particles, and formaldehyde also set on the carpet. Carpet is one of the most toxic exposures. She's absolutely right. Thank you for weighing in on that, Allie. For the remediators, everything will need to be thoroughly cleaned or disposed of before you move it back into the space. Anything that cannot be cleaned must be moved back into this new and perfect environment, must not be moved back into the perfect environment, or it will cross-contaminate the environment. For those who decide to move, the same applies to moving into the new house. Nothing dirty goes in. This new house, this new environment, you have worked your butt off to do it. So I'm going to empower you, and I'm going to give you health coach orders to protect this environment. You will be able to clean cross-contamination from a visitor, but that will be your personal call on how much you want to do that. So just think about that. It also just ask yourself, are they going to contaminate my couch? Am I going to be able to do that? Some people choose to socialize outside the home because of that, or on their porch, or have some kind of measure. So that's every individual make a different decision on how they do that. So just think about that. This is your perfect environment. Protect it. If you are neither a mover or a remediator, then the separating process is your next move after doing the food, lifestyle, and preliminary environmental issues. All three groups need to continue to make diet and lifestyle changes, such as the ones from my January 22nd talk. For many, they continue to use the diet and lifestyle covered in my first talk and continue to improve each year doing just this. Doing this may get you to 75 to 95% well. The longer you're on your healing journey, the better each year gets. This is combined with functional medicine support. However, I want to clear that this path will buy you time, but it is not the end game. You can choose to do this forever. And if you do that, I fully support your choice. That is your choice. However, this functional medicine continued, but this functional medicine, such as the adrenal support, the antioxidants, the lifestyle changes, the constant detoxing, cryotherapy, saunas, detox baths, eating to heal, always, always, always becomes that much more important. And so that work will be continued for life or until you fix the environment. So it's a lot of work. It's not cheap either way, but it's just up to you on how you want to move forward. So functional medicine treats root causes. And this is a case where your root causes have their own root causes. So that functional medicine views adrenal fatigue as a root cause. However, this adrenal fatigue has more root causes: your hormonal imbalances, your chronic inflammation, your autoimmune issues, your brain dysfunction, your thyroid dysfunction. All of these things are typical, and they will need to be maintained forever until you fix your environment. But for others, they've gotten a taste of healthy, and so they get 75 to 90% and they won't settle. And when you get there, to that point where you don't want to settle, then the next step is waiting on you. So I'm going to tell you what I tell all my patients. This is your journey. It goes at your pace. So once you fix the environment, then you can start what they call the Schumaker Protocol. The Schumaker Protocol is basically, I'm going to put it in a very simplified way. You eliminate the exposure. You maintain that eliminated exposures, and then use binders to get rid of the stored toxins. That's pretty much it. So as you can see, it's a lot more simple once you get to that point, but there's a lot of steps in between point A and point B. So I'm going to get a little spiritual for just a second on everyone for just a moment. You are not given this unless you can handle it. Yes, it seems daunting and hard and stressful, and at some moments even unfair, but there is an opportunity here also. Likely, there are many opportunities. For me, those opportunities were to learn all of this so that I can turn around and help you. My opportunity was to grow spiritually in relationship to my personal possessions, in relationship to my food, my life, to love my body more, to find my purpose, to grow spiritually in my relationship with others, and to accept my emotions and how they go for that. The layers that I have mentioned are only the beginning. Other ones are adverse childhood experiences or other traumas, spirituality, and your whole relationship with the whole process. There's so many opportunities here, and they will all bless you. So I want to share my favorite quote, and it's the one that set me on my journey. And it's the one that I will remember every day of my journey until I reach the end, which the end is basically dying happily and wonderfully in my bed, just the way God intended. But here it is. It's my favorite quote. Those with chronic illness say it's the worst thing that ever happened to them. But those that beat it say it's the best thing that ever happened to them. Which one you decide to be is the best determiner of how your story ends. So I wanted to leave you with that, and I want you to really let that sink in. I'm going to say it again. Those with chronic illness say it's the worst thing that ever happened to them. Those who beat it say it's the best thing that ever happened to them. The good news is you get to decide which one you are going to be. I truly 100% believe that. It is up to you on how far you're willing to go. It is up to you on how fast you're willing to get there. So do you. So my third talk, before I go and talk about my third talk a little bit, I'm going to go back to Katie Saftenberg's, is there a good resource for helping someone determine if they're in a water damaged building? I don't know them off the top of my head. Thank you for your feedback on that. Off the top of my head what the names are. There are good resources. So what you're looking for is, I think it's called thermographic scanning. And so they're looking for thermal scanning that will tell you if there's a water source in your building. A lot of times other sources that you can do are to find the history of the building. So for example, if you are an apartment complex, you can ask if there's ever been any leaks in there, any history. It may take some research. Some people will just not know the answer. I've talked to realtors who owned houses, and all they had was what they had maintained since they owned it. And then people are not required to disclose this when they sell a house, so it's not something that is usually transferred with it. A lot of water damage is visible. So for example, there's a checklist when you go searching for places, and it talks about places to check on the outside of homes. Windowsills are a big one, under sinks, of course, by washing machines. Check walls and ceilings and insides of closets and garages and over by the water heater, and the list goes on and on and on. So that checklist really is one of those things. I happen to know the best way to find out if you're in a water damaged building is an Hermey-Hertzby test. It's going to be the least time consuming. I want to say it costs between, you can pay for it in stages. So I think it's like $150 to get the test and another $250 or something like that to get it interpreted when you send it back. So around $350, $400, you can find out if your current building has mycotoxins in it and to what degree. So that is the best idea. If you already know that you are in a water damaged building and then testing it, that's up to you. Do you want a baseline because you're trying to remediate and improve it? Do you need a baseline if you're going to move? These are all questions to ask. I chose not to test my environment because I knew that there was a water damaged, because it was an older apartment building. I knew that there was water damage because I had a sink leak, because there was warped flooring, things like that. So I didn't feel the need to, because I also couldn't remediate it. So I chose to not test it and save that test for where I was going to move into next. So I hope that answers some questions. But yeah, that is the best resource to find out if you're in a water damaged building, is whether or not there's mycotoxins. What are some of the worst molds on Hertzme's? There is a list. There's several books on mold that list it. I know Aspergillus is one of those things. There's several other. I don't have it memorized. I'm sorry. I have resources that I just flip to, like the checklists and stuff like that when I cross those paths. But I apologize, I don't know them off the top of my head. So sorry about that. So how your story ends, I want to go back to that, because the next talk that I'm going to be doing is on a mold-related illness. So I've been able to reverse POTS, which is postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. I've been able to do it from a functional medicine standpoint. And so I'll be talking about that and diving that in as it relates to CIRS. So even if you don't have POTS necessarily, some of the same contributing factors to POTS are typical of every CIRS patient, things like adrenal fatigue, hypothalamus pituitary dysfunction, and other things like that. So if you want to learn about some of those things that are common, I'm going to be talking about POTS from a CIRS standpoint, but also from a functional medicine standpoint, talking about reversing it and what all is involved in that part of the brain and how it affects the heart and blood pressure and things like that. So definitely stay tuned for my third talk. That is on February 5th. Let me see if there's anything else that I meant. So a lot of mistakes, I just want to recap real quick. A lot of mistakes is in testing the environment. A lot of mistakes are in testing themselves. A lot of mistakes are tested in cleaning the environment when you do fix the environment. And also how vigilant to be and how not to cross-contaminate things. So those are some of the mistakes that could be. If you do choose to move, again, like I said, there's a separate checklist. Let's see, I'm just going to scroll down on that. Okay, so for the that's all about CIRS. Does anybody else have any other questions concerning addressing the environment or any of the material that I have covered today? Jamie says, I had air samples, but aspergillus penicillin came up as matching the same outdoor levels. Is this useless information without an ERMI? Yes, because if it's an air sample, it's useless. So aspergillus and penicillin are both, I remember those are on the list. Thank you for the trigger of the memory. Those are on the list, and because they're heavy, they would not be available in the air sample. So of course they're going to be the same as outside in your air sample because they've all fallen to the floor into that dust. So yuck, sorry about that, bad news bearer. Anything else? What do you recommend if someone has a school or workplace that has a water damaged building? And Katie, thank you for saying that you're looking forward to my third talk. It's going to be, it's very powerful. So recommend for a school or workplace. That's again something that I would sit down with your health coach and talk out your options and your consequences and figure out what your choice is. So for example, I'm going to use myself as an example because it's the most accessible way to do it. So I'm in a building, I'm in a very large building. I am on the first floor and I know that there's water damage on the third floor because I can smell mold. So my office may or may not be fine. I don't know until I test. But as soon as I fix my my home environment, which is my home office, as well as where I sleep and where I spend my weekends. So as soon as I fix that, I'm going to test my office. And then I will cross that bridge when I come to it. Some of my options there are to talk to my employer about future options. We as a company are growing very fast. So, you know, where will we be in a year? Will we be in this office? Are we looking for that? Can I just avoid the third floor? Is it clean down here? What are my other options? What's best for my patients? All of those questions are something that I've just got to take time to process. If I was in a school, if you can change schools, do. There's an entire book about sick building syndrome in children in their schools. Many have to be taken out, get a medical excuse to go to another school, or they have to be homeschooled. So these are all just decisions that nobody can make but the patient with the help of a doctor or a health coach to weigh your pros and cons and make informed decisions. Once you've cleaned your primary environment, most people will agree that you can take binders at that time. Everybody agrees that you can take them after you fix your environment, because occasionally you're going to go to a movie theater and then find out afterwards it was water damage, or get sick at 15 minutes into it, it's too late. Then you're going to need those binders for life to help you maintain, because you can't live in a bubble. But the places that you're going every day, it's a bigger conversation. Most people find grocery stores and the places that they go all the time, grocery stores, drug stores, where they pick up their pharmacies. There's communities to help you. For example, I know that Denver has a mold community online, and they all say, hey, does anyone know a clean grocery store? Everyone know a clean doctor's office, and they share that information. So that's a great way to find those kind of information in your own area. Until you have those, then you just have to do the best you can do with what you do and just keep moving forward. Just keep moving forward. Is it possible to transfer the mycotoxins from other buildings such as work, doctor's office, stores, etc., to you and then into your home? Yes, it is. So I talked about that earlier, how some people go as far as having decontamination chambers with airlocks in their garage so that they don't contaminate. Other people are not willing to do that. I think that's a little extreme. So like for me and my husband, we've agreed to go straight into the laundry room and throw our clothes in the washer and then go shower before we sit down on our couch and contaminate it. So they'll take a little practice, you know, and you'll have to work out the kinks for you and your specific family. Any medicinal mushrooms okay to take? I would be very cautious about that. Every case is different, so I can't give a blanket yes or a blanket no, but I would be extremely cautious. Most of us carry the celiac gene. And if you're having neurological syndrome, neurological disorders, it is very likely that you have had your celiac gene turned on. Even if you were already gluten-free, the mold is enough to turn the gene on. And if you're having neurological syndromes, then it's most likely you have leaky brain barrier 2. When this happens, cross reactives also are very high, and your sensitivity levels are very high. So I would stay away from mushrooms in general. Some will also have to stay away from yeast. I've developed a dietary protocol called the Celiac Elimination Protocol that is not only for celiacs, it's for those having neurological disorders or neurological dysfunction who also carry this HLA gene. So that protocol would be highly recommended for anyone who is wary about foods. We don't always know that they're causing us a problem until we take them out and get better. So food is a very big factor, both in removing irritants, but also in repairing the damage. So I also blend the Celiac Elimination Protocol with either or AIP and Wall's protocol. Mainly because Wall's protocol is used to repair neurological damage. And so if I could blend that with the one or both of the elimination diets, AIP and CEP, then I can get somewhere very fast with somebody. And helping them. So I would be wary of medicinal mushrooms. That would be something that, you know, individual, but you also could be taking them and be fine and then later lose them. So be careful about that. Does water damage automatically mean there are mycotoxins? Good question. It's an excellent question, Cindy. Water, for example, it takes 48 hours of untreated water exposure, such as a leaky pipe or a water-soaked carpet or anything like that. It takes 45 hours for these molds to set up shop and start producing mycotoxins. So can I say automatically? No, but can I say there's a 99.99999% chance? Yes. I can say if there's water damage, I would assume so, but you can verify that with a mycotoxin, with an Hertzme test to know how much they are. It also depends on which molds are being produced by that water damaged area of your house. Most leaks are not addressed within 48 hours. So that's a very important part of maintaining your house after you own a house or after you've remediated, is making sure that any water intrusions are handled immediately. Okay, any other questions? Go ahead and send them through. I'm going to sign off in just a minute as soon as I make sure that there are no other questions. As I mentioned, I'll be talking about the functional medicine side of POTS and its relationship to CIRS and how to reverse it using food and lifestyle and functional medicine, how to address common issues with it, such as gastroparesis, chronic hydration issues, tachycardia, blood pressure irregularities, depression, and other neurodysfunction that come with it, lab tests to get, and much more. So come back and see me on February 5th to learn more. I will see you then, and I'll also be talking, as I mentioned, I'll also be talking about some of the ways that CIRS relates to POTS and how it causes some of the contributing factors and anomalies to some POTS specifically, and the overlapping conditions that commonly come with this disorder, including chronic viruses, fibromyalgia, and also autoimmune. Do you need to tear out walls to test for mold in walls? Cindy, earlier in the talk, I mentioned that do not tear out walls. You can do that, but if they come back negative, you may not be done. Mold can be invisible, and it can hide up in areas where a wall sample is not going to show you, such as up by the ceiling. And again, it can be invisible. So if there's water damage in those areas, but you don't see any visible mold, I would test further. So this is why I say don't get a mold guy, because a mold guy, unless he is specifically trained in this, is not going to be qualified to test your house. So you'll need some checklists for him to put together with what he knows so that he knows enough to help you. If you need any help with it, by all means, call me at the office. I'm going to type in my office phone number, so if anyone needs help with their journey, you can call and see if you qualify for a free consult. We do not take every case. But we do interview people because we have a limited number of spots. Therefore, we're real picky about who gets them because we want to make sure that you can be successful, both because we can help you and also because you can help yourself. So if anybody needs help with their case, by all means, give me a call at Integrative Health Center of Alabama, and we'll get you in just as soon as we can. Okay, thank you so much. Let's see, Katie, you're welcome for that. Everybody, you're welcome for that. Thank you so much for all the love and all the emojis and all that kind of stuff. I really appreciate it. I will see you on February 5th. Have a wonderful Monday. Bye-bye.